Good evening, mic testing. Mr. Anjan, could you please identify yourself?
Hi, this is Anjan.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
So loud and clear. Yes. Mr. Anthony, could you please identify yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Anthony.
Thank you, sir. Loud and clear. Ms. Avni, could you please identify yourself?
Hi, this is Avni.
Thank you, ma'am. Loud and clear. Ms. Nivedita, could you please identify yourself?
Hi there, Nivedita here.
Thank you, ma'am. Loud and clear. Saji?
Hi, Saji here.
Thank you, Saji. Loud and clear. Vikrant?
Hi, this is Vikrant here.
Thank you. Loud and clear. We'll be beginning in another 1 minute. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of Sphere India COVID-19 Academy, which is a joint collaboration of UNICEF, WHO India, and HCL Foundation aimed towards the capacity building of frontline workers, outreach workers, and volunteers for COVID-19 preparedness and response. Today is our 67th session. This one is a panel discussion on NGO programming in the ongoing and future programming by CSOs and other stakeholders towards national and global development, DRR, and climate goals. It is also going to have a significant impact on resources available for CSO programming. In this panel discussion, the leaders from CSOs will discuss these challenges and explore strategies for adaptation, innovation, and solutions at organization and collective level. For this discussion today, we have with us some very eminent panelists. I'm going to introduce them one by one. We have with us Ms. Avni Malhotra, who works with the Heifer Project International India office as a country director. She joined Heifer Project International in March 2009. Her qualifications include Masters in Social Work and Bachelor's in Psychology from Delhi University. She has more than 2 decades of experience in the social development sector and has worked in different national and international development organizations like Swiss Agency, Plan International, Oxfam, etc., in different roles and capacities. Next, I would like to welcome Ms. Vidisha Pillai, who joined Save the Children in 2015 and was overseeing programs and policy impact before taking over as CEO. Prior to joining Save the Children, Vidisha was working as the head of strategy, results, and communication at UK DFID for India. We also have with us Ms. Nivedita, who is the country director of WHH India, a Bonn-based INGO working on food and nutrition security in about 40 countries globally. Nivedita has an experience of more than 24 years in the development and CSR sector on rural development, foreign sovereignty, and related issues. We have with us Mr. Anthony Chetri, He's a professionally trained social worker with over 19 years of experience in providing high quality technical support to projects that work for the most marginalized communities. He started his career working from the grassroots level organization and then rose to become a lecturer in St. Xavier's College of Social Work, Nepal, as well as served as senior manager level with a couple of national and international level social development organizations. We have with us Mr. Saji Varghese from World Vision India, who is the head humanitarian programs for World Vision India. He completed his MSW from Indore School of Social Work and has worked with development projects in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Anjan Bag, who is the Manager Humanitarian Response and Disaster Risk Reduction for Caritas India. He has over 18 years of experience in disaster management, DRR, and climate change adaptation, training needs assessment, implementation, and evaluation of programs. Lastly, I would like to welcome Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, who will be a moderator for today's panel discussion. He has 24 years of professional experience working at interagency policy level and frontline humanitarian action with government, UN, corporations, CSOs, and armed forces in diverse contexts. He has led interagency coordination for more than 100 disasters and represents on governance and policy level committees of several international organizations. He currently works as the CEO of Sphere India. We were also to be joined by Mr. Anshu Gupta from Gunj, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, Mr. Anshu could not unfortunately make it to the session. I would now hand over to Vikrant to please go ahead with the proceedings of this session. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Valerie, for the introduction and setting the context. So as briefly shared by Valerie, I think we see that COVID-19, what we are facing is one of the biggest disruptor of the life. And now we're calling it the COVID is a new reality, a new normal. In India, the new emergency, public health emergency through COVID has been unfolding. I think one of the biggest change perhaps experienced by the NGOs was within their existing development and the ongoing development and other programs. That's what I think. So I think most of the programming in the pre-COVID context has been developed looking at a particular methodologies, ways of working, set of indicators, and we are now into a post-COVID era where many of them needed to be adapted, innovated. Maybe we look at innovations. Many of them may not be actually relevant anymore. I think but not just the existing programming. We also see what the COVID response as well as the future programming now by the NGOs is going to have one of the biggest disruptor or the biggest change towards that is going to be the COVID presence now. So, and not just this, we also see that it has greatly influenced the resources, how the resources is going to be available for this programming action by the CSOs and other stakeholders. We see that one of the biggest thrust has been of the program action in India, the retail fundraising as well as the CSR is going to be impacted by the developments post-COVID. And also, so is it going to impact the work which is being done in terms of a long-term planning, looking at the development goals, sustainable development goals, be it the DRR targets and the climate targets, which we have been working on. So it is in this context and around these issues that this panel, we will explore the issues and see that what's the options available, what's the innovation, adaptation, and the solutions available in working in this context. So toward this, we had a very good, very eminent panel with us. And I think my first question, I would address it to Mr. Saji from World Vision. Saji, how you see that the COVID has impacted the existing program within the World Vision, and what adaptations or innovations are being done by your organizations to meet these requirements? Over to you, Saji.
Yeah, thank you, Vikrant. Thank you, Sphere, for organizing this, and also welcome all the participants. Actually, we all understand that besides many challenges, lockdown and social distancing has been the major challenge for all NGOs who are working with the communities. And that has affected a lot of our ongoing work that we have committed to the communities. However, being a direct implementing agency and also having local partners with us, some of our changes were very fast, and we had a proactive leadership. We were able to reprogram and repurpose our budgets and activities based on whatever little assessment we could do immediately. And some of the quick wins for us was working with the government, strengthening the health systems. And this time the government actually came forward seeking help from NGOs, and that was actually a good sign, where government also helped us in a lot of distributions, because our staff were locked up because of the social distancing and lockdown. Yeah, that was one thing. Second thing I would like to say is use of technology. We have a lot of in-house capacity which we use for training our volunteers, our staff, especially on awareness on COVID and also on how to go about our work. And let me tell you, we have more than 1,000, actually around 2,000 staff and consultants working with us. So we trained all the 100% of our staff using digital technology, whether it be through WhatsApp, Zoom, and Google Meets, and different media. Besides this, we also did through virtual media, we did rapid assessments, more than 110 districts in India, and we were able to come up with a recovery plan that will be finalized next week, and we'll be implementing that in the coming months. And we also have planned for a post-implementation monitoring systems. These all we are using our virtual media and phones and other media that are available. Another good thing that happened with us was till recently we were actually departmentally responding, the disaster management taking the lead, and we were mainly trained on 3 or 4 disasters, so responding. But now I would like to proudly say that all of us have been trained on handling pandemic situations. Not only that, now we have emerged a response model where we can respond across the country in simultaneous districts. Thank you, Vikrant. That is in short.
Thank you so much, Saji. And I think what I hear from you is that how quickly you could adapt to the changing requirements. And I think this heartening to hear the collaboration you had with government, I think, is to deliver some of your programs and the use of technology for training your 100% of your staff assessments you've done. Maybe I think I'll get Guru Anthony for the same question. Anthony, I think what Saji has shared is how they have adapted it. But I would like to understand from you. I think IGSS has long drawn programs, multi-year programs with their communities. I think how did it impacted your ongoing programs? I think it's more about the challenges, your experiences around that. I think that we'd like to understand that. So over to you, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Vikrant. Yes, IGSS has 2 major flagship programs, one for the rural India and one for the urban India. And in urban, basically, we deal with domestic workers, construction workers, street vendors, which are all related with the programs which are related with a right-based approach, engaging with the government, with the administration, also for the nutrition level program which we have in rural India, targeting the malnourished children, lactating and pregnant mothers. So this whole program, which is more of people contacting people, talking to them, making people aware, sensitize them, empowerment, totally got impacted because of COVID-19 and lockdown. Our staff couldn't go to the community because of the lockdown, and also of a fear to get infected or also made to make others infected through them. So the whole program, which is more with engaging people, community mobilization, organizing themselves, talking to them, that all got really, really impacted. And what we all started talking to IGSs as a whole, started talking to the donors, and we all changed our whole strategy, maybe focusing initially with relief, because hunger was one of the important the problem or important issue that the urban India and rural India was facing. So providing immediate relief with food, sanitation kit was one of the priority, and thanks to all our donors who also accepted that, and we could modify. But yes, in this whole process, we found one good thing is that the whole idea of community volunteers got strengthened within us, that yes, we can do our programs with community volunteers. You cannot imagine in Kashmir, in Jharkhand, in Orissa, the community-based organization which we had facilitated, strengthened, were the first respondents to the people who were impacted by lockdown and coronavirus and the COVID-19. So they were responding the relief, they were going. So the whole strategy at IGS has also changed, that we need to have more trust, more faith, and involve strategically strongly these community volunteers and community-based institutions in implementing the projects, rather than fully depending maybe on our project staff. So these were some of the thoughts, some of the reflections that continuously we are doing at IGSS. And definitely digital platform became one of the major platform to connect with the people. You cannot imagine people in the villages started using Zoom and all, but then there is also a lot of concern about that, how many people have access to mobile, or how many people have access to mobile with internet. Again, in that gender, in that caste, all these dynamics do plays an important role. So the whole that digital and access to digital platforms, access to internet is, I think, the other important aspect that we are now looking for. Right to internet, right to access to internet is some of the things. And lastly, I would like to say that this online was a part of a power structure, definitely, but now the online media, online platform, or online thing will become a power structure, and we all have to use this power structure in a way where we can really work for the right of the marginalized community. Yes, Vikrant.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anthony. And I think you did delve into the issues to begin with, that how it impacted your ongoing programs and all. So, were you able to look at some kind of a reallocations in or changes within that program, or yes, I think starting up a new response for the COVID reality, or something different. But within the existing programs, how did you adapt it that one?
Yeah, the existing programs, now what we are doing is that we are trying to connect with the community-based organizations. We have used digital platforms to reach out to the people, to the community volunteers, strengthening and training them so that they go and interact with the people. Also in restoration of the livelihood, maybe the program was more of ride based, but at present maybe restoring livelihood of the street vendors or the construction workers who have gone back to the villages becomes more important. So changing the whole strategy in restoring livelihood and then talking about the right is something that we are now adapting ourselves. Yes, that.
Okay. So it's mean more from the earlier plan methods, you're more shifting it toward the community volunteers, and also using more digital means. That's what I'm going to say. And also in terms of strategy, you're shifting it towards more livelihood and the other sort of programs. Okay, I think that's good. I think it's been
Yeah,
helpful.
also one thing I want to say is that the whole wash component has become more important in all our projects because of coronavirus. So that also looking into much stronger way in our strategy, how to make people aware about the whole health and hygiene is one of the things in all our programs. Mainstreaming it strongly is also one of the strategy that we have adopted.
Not treat as a wash because of the behavioral changes which are required by the people
Exactly.
for social distancing, hand washing. So wash as a strategy got included in your work. That's what I think is you're saying. I think that's some of the things. Really good to understand this, and maybe for my Avni can help us, see things further. So, Avni, from your perspective, how do you see, COVID is going to impact our the ongoing work on achieving SDG targets, or maybe DRR and climate targets? What do you see that it's going to how is going to change our programming, also the way NGOs program for these global goals now? Over to you, Avni.
Okay, thank you, Vikram. So, what one does see is that we've kind of gone back. We were moving towards the SDGs, we were moving towards ending hunger and poverty and achieving the climate change goals that we had all set out for ourselves, looking at gender empowerment and everything. But now we look at it, we know that you get the feeling that you've been kind of pushed back from the targets that were you set, or the paths that you had been set on. And what looked like achievable now seems like it will need more time for us to catch up, even where we are, and we'll have to find new ways of working there. Um, the SDGs, I feel we will have to redefine them, but the other things that will get pushed back are like, doubling farmers' income. We were very committed to something like that, but that is also going to get pushed. That was a goal that was a country target, as well as what we were looking at in terms of meeting the living income of farmers. So we feel that will also go back. And we will have to also change our style of working. I mean, we were looking at slowly building community level groups, and I agree with Anthony completely that the trust level and was a revealing factor. How much the community could do themselves was a big learning for us also. We need to work with the markets, I feel, very seriously, because the markets need to open up, the markets need to be educated, and people need to be better consumers than they are in helping using the material that is being produced by our poor farmers. DRR, I've not worked in DRR for the last 11, 12 years, but looking at DRR now, I feel DRR needs to adapt to going in and out of lockdowns, because I feel the moment it becomes a contamination zone or a quarantine zone, we're going to be in a lockdown, and then we're going to be coming out of lockdown. So we need to build capacities within the community to be able to cope with this in and out of lockdown situation, and make more field level preparation for that. We've used these 3-4 months to re-strategize, and since we don't work in DRR, so we were not as busy as some of you were, but we were very busy trying to get our strategy together so that we can go back to the field as soon as possible. And we came up with three keywords, three key areas that we would like to focus on, which is scale, permanence of impact, and partnerships. So, which is some of the future questions that you're going to ask us. Back to you, Vikram.
Great. Thank you so much, Avni. I think that was really helpful. And indeed, I think this survey by UNICEF and Save the Children together is showing that I think the number of children who are going to be living in extreme poverty worldwide is going to increase by 15%. So yes, while we were at this stage, when perhaps in terms of our targets for 2020, we were looking at reduction in poverty level, the COVID reality is that there's a significant increase and a pushback, in terms of the global goals. And you very rightly said that perhaps we have to rewrite them again. Maybe from Nivedita, from your experience also, I think, and knowing the work of Wealth Hunger Hilfe with primarily with food and nutrition security, and the kind of a food and nutrition security crisis we are seeing in India, with the large number of migrant worker population going back. So how do you see, where do we see in India going to stand in terms of global goals? How is it going to impact some of the global goals toward the SDG, DRR, and climate? Over to you, Nivedita.
Thank you, Vikrant. So I think that the SDGs in the current scenario are even more relevant than ever. And we are realizing the interdependence of the world, how it is one world. We all have to take common measures. We have to address goals commonly. So this is becoming increasingly clear. And in the same breath, we must say that achieving SDGs is also becoming equally relevant, because and we need to address it together. And like food security, huge issue. I mean, we've seen how the food chains have been disrupted, and welfare has been working to address the food chains, the disrupted food chains and all its programs now since COVID. So this is one of the things that we've done, and we feel that all the SDGs are now becoming even more interlinked, and we see that even clearly. So I mean, in our own strategies, we are now also linking our goals to health, So how food, nutrition towards health outcomes, So we see that SDGs are clearly linked. We need to address them together. We need to address them globally together. And also we have to build back better. So while we are saying that we have to address the pandemic, but we know that the pandemic will go and the SDGs will remain. We need to move towards them with even more vigor, with an even more higher commitment, because we know that I mean, we've seen how the pandemic has affected the vulnerable. So it's the most vulnerable countries globally that have been affected. They have been the hardest hit. The most vulnerable people, even within our country, have been the hardest hit. And we now need to re-emphasize our march towards the SDGs. It's important to address the pandemic, but we have to work together to achieve the SDG goals. And I don't think the pandemic will dilute the overall focus on the SDGs. It might change the focus for a short while towards health outcomes. But in the mid and the long runs, we need to come back together. We need to work together to achieve the goals, And I mean, this is broadly globally, but also within our programs, we are seeing that, So we have adapted our programs to address the health goals, like WASH, like looking at migrant laborers, like looking at immediate food relief, But in the mid and the long run, we know that we have to get back to the real goals, the SDGs. We have to look at long-term food security. We have to look at long-term poverty reduction, livelihoods. We've seen how all of these have been impacted, and we while in the short run we've taken relief measures in our programming, but in the long run we need to get back to the SDGs through the main goals.
Yeah, I think that you made a very important statement, that I think whatever maybe we have to, SDG remains relevant and we have to stay focused onto them. I think it's
Hello, I can't hear. Am I the only one?
No, I
Oh,
think.
no,
No,
no.
no,
I
we
think
also
Vikrant is the one.
lost Vikrant.
Maybe we can just wait for a few seconds for
Yeah.
this connection to get stabilized.
Mhm.
Vikrant, are we audible to you?
So maybe while Vikrant come back, I can continue a little bit, because climate change goals was also a question. And I think that while the focus has shifted in the short run, but in the long run also the focus towards climate change will not be diluted globally. And while there are some efforts and there are some disruptions to the international summits, and there has been lobbying for cutting down and relaxing the emissions norms and the emissions trading. But I think in once the pandemic is dealt with, we are going to come back to the real climate change goals as well. And in fact, we should see this pandemic as also an opportunity to shift to cleaner goals, to green trades. So it's all about, how do we build back? How do we build back better? move towards cleaner goals, look at policy stimulus towards cleaner energy, towards cleaner livelihoods. And I think at the policy level, there has been a move globally towards this. And I think I'm quite positive that we will emerge out of the pandemic a bit more wiser on also on the climate issues. So whether it's climate or SDGs or also DRR. So even in terms of DRR, I think we have all learned during the pandemic, and we have all learned the interdependence of countries. How do we work together? The learning that nobody is safe till everybody is safe, and also how to do things jointly. Sorry, Vikrant, you disappeared in between, and I took the opportunity to continue on DRR and climate change.
Thank you so much for covering me up, Nivedita. I think there's just a power flux happen, and I got back with my mobile connectivity now.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. I think it's good that you touched upon the green goals, the climate, and the DRR bit also. But I would like maybe I think Anjan and or Saji, probably Anjan, you can first a bit more. How do you think this whole COVID thing has impacted our DRR goals, humanitarian and DRR goals? Briefly, Anjan, and then maybe Saji also. You can focus more on humanitarian and DRR, though Avni and Nivedita has elaborated a lot on the SDG and some on the climate link also. Over to you, Anjan.
Thanks, Vikrant, for invitations. I'm happy to engage here. In fact, Vikrant, I reciprocate the thoughts with other panelists that is going to be a difficult time, especially for the communities where the NGO had made some commitments to them and started working, and then pandemic has the physical distancing and other associated factors has reduced our access and control with them to talk to them. So there would be a certain distance again with the communities where we have got commitment. Bringing from there, the commitment of the global commitment and the local commitment is going to have a larger impact now, especially with the communities that we work, be it in rural and the urban sectors. Just with a small examples, I'd like to give it. It's like our social programmings, our social protections schemes, and the flagship programs that were designed not keeping in mind the COVID pandemic or such a contingency situations that we are at now. Just giving you a small example, when whole humanitarian sectors were struggling with tsunami, and then we started talking about the disaster management plans, and the tsunami is forgotten now. Now I hope in the future also the COVID will go, and then we'll come back to our normalcy, started working in the development programming, but it's going to live with us in our mind. And also the future programming should always keep looking at the unforeseen disasters like this, not only COVID pandemic, and when there is a the geographic is multi-hazard prone. So this my point of view would be that the planning process has to be thorough, looked into the futures and multiple futures and unforeseen era, what is going to come.
Great. Thank you so much, Anjan. And also, Anjan, do you see that it's going to impact on some of the ongoing social protection schemes of the government of India, maybe some of the flagship schemes? There could be positive impacts also, say on maybe the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan sanitation programs. But what do you see the other programs and the impact of this on that? Over to you, Anjan.
Vikrant, there would be both ways impact in the communities and also in the programs. It's giving it a negative impact that is going to create. So let's look at the huge inflow of returning migrants into the rural areas, and our Manrega programs will it be able to occupy such a high influx of the populations? Of course, there has been a lot of good thought, pouring a huge amount of money to that, but is that in the planning processes of bringing them, is the panchayat ready, or the Rojgar Sabab is ready to accept the new ideas, and also it has to be dealt with the skill set of the people, those who have returned back into the rural area. Secondly, all the other flagship, be it social total sanitation campaigns and others, will have both positive and negative impacts, looking at the investment part of it, and also utilization part of it, and also into the planning part of it.
Yeah, I think that's great sharing, Anjan. Sajeev, from your perspective, how do you see it's going to impact some of the flagship programs and other social protection schemes of the government of India?
I think yeah, I agree with Anjan what he says, and it may be a little too early to say much about our flagship programs. Some of the states, indeed, in fact, most of the states have done their PDS system, used their PDS systems for relief distribution to all the people, especially those below the poverty line and all. There are some states like Tamil Nadu where they give to all the card holders actually, and some of the states have done good through cash transfer as well. But otherwise, I think most of our flagship programs have taken a hit, especially the Anganwadi, where we hear the reports that some of the Anganwadis, some places, they are going home to deliver those kits for the children who are malnourished. But will it be properly handled at the household level is one issue. Then the whole program of mother and child welfare, those pregnant ladies, the immunization of the children. I think this, because of the lockdown and the social distancing and all the hospitals being, busy addressing a lot of issues, I think this will take a big hit. Narega is one of the major casualty, actually. I think so. Especially like Anjan said, when a lot of migrant workers from the urban areas or other states have returned back to the rural areas. Now the challenge is that already existing jobs or employment opportunities in the rural areas is very less, and how to adjust this influx and the challenge of so many, laborers. So probably, yeah, and some of these laborers have their cards in the urban area where they were living, and when they come back here, will they get the PDS distribution? Are they eligible for those? That will be another challenge. Well, then that's also an opportunity for the government to rethink, and yeah, maybe in the next questions we'll discuss about that.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there may be opportunities for a more rethinking to happen. I think you rightly said about the Narega, and there's also a study by Path and one more. I think maybe Population Foundation of India, in terms of how because of the lockdown, how has it impacted the other primary healthcare services across the country. I think the utilization has gone really low, which has its own impacts on increase in mortality and morbidity both. So the areas of certainly concern, and maybe things to pick up, perhaps more with the civil society also. It's opened up as new ways and new places of a collaboration. But again, I think yeah, you want to say something, Saji?
Yeah, I was saying food insecurity is one of the biggest challenge, because in our survey of more than 118 districts, 63% of the people have reduced the number of meals from 3 to 2 or even 1. And this PDS systems, however good they are working, it's not able to meet the requirements of the people because their livelihoods are lost. So I think there will be a big burden on the government and all the service providers. Yeah, just I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Great, I think. Okay, so it certainly opened up the places where a lot of rethinking is required within the government and also in the civil society. There may be possible options for collaboration, but this require more resources also. I think there's a big impact in terms of the resources available now, looking at the current need, and also I think what's going to be there in the future, because the economy is also very badly hit by the COVID. Anthony, can you help us see that how do you see the availability of resources now and in future for the NGO programming and maybe the collaborative works we are seeing it here? Over to you, Anthony.
Yeah, it will be a big challenge. The resource mobilization uh, was a big challenge always for the civil society organization, if you see. And report I was reading from 2009 onwards, the requirement of the fund for the civil society organization and the mobilization are a huge gap. Means what we required, we were not getting. And now when the organizations which are in the Europe or which are in the Western countries who are supporting us, their economy is really getting into recession and a severe recession, the big question that the whole resources that they were, the institutional funding that was coming from the perspective of people's empowerment, for people's benefit, will, I think, will reduce a lot. So it will be a big challenge. How do we mobilize those resources? The resources will lessen up, and then the people will have to really compete to get those resources. So it will be difficult. The other thing, the CSR funding that was coming now due to the recession and the economic depression, the whole corporates are also not having profit enough to provide us the CSR funding. So the whole traditional way of resource mobilization, which also implies that when we say resource is only money, that whole concept, I think we need to relook now. So for us, it may not be only money as a resource. The civil society organization have to think that beyond money, what are the resources that are available, which we can access, we can have. So I don't know, I cannot elaborate that what are those resources, but we need to really think on that, brainstorm on that. The other thing is also that the whole understanding of community, which IGSS has felt very strongly, how community has become the first respondent this time in COVID-19 and the lockdown. In Kashmir, we have seen IGSS areas where we have seen how the farmers group have supported the marginal farmer groups. So this whole idea of community-based project, where community or from privileged community members of the community is helping the marginalized or the poor community people. So community funded projects. So these are some of the areas that we really need to look, because you see, after we had COVID-19, we had two big storms, both in Eastern India and Western India, and the resources mobilized for those were really not very healthy, or not. We are not happy with the. We could not mobilize good resource. The Sundarban people are impacted. The people in Maharashtra are impacted. Gujarat are impacted, but we don't have resources. But I think NGO or the civil society organization need to rethink on the definition of resources that we need to mobilize, and have to find out a new technique and methodology rather than go for crowdsourcing or go for institutional, because that has become old and that is not possible. I think if not possible, I will not say, but challenging. And the last that I want to say and reinforce, that community should be the part of mobilizing resources, and the privileged community should provide the marginal and the poor community. The whole issue of volunteerism need to be now evoked and thought about. So that's what initial thought about the question that you asked, Vikrant.
Yeah, I think very comprehensively, I think you analyzed the things and also the ways forward. Like we see resource more community themselves supporting the communities. I think more people participation directly, right? But you mentioned about the impact is going to have on the international resources that's available, because most of the diaspora and the countries who have been supporting have also themselves been impacted. Uh, uh, from Saji, from your experience, do you see how is it going to impact the resources, maybe the international finances? What do you feel, Saji?
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of challenge, because in the countries that used to support us, especially the Western countries, they themselves are facing this pandemic. And but actually, I see a lot of opportunities especially with the corporates. Although a lot of them have gone to the PM CARES fund, but still we have seen a lot of increase who are interested in working with NGOs. Especially we were able to raise a lot of funds with the corporates for this COVID response. Yeah, I think there are opportunities while there are challenges as well. Is that your question, Vikrant?
Yeah, I think Sajid, talking about the corporates, it's also while I think when the COVID started impacting their life sometime in the month of March and onwards in India, uh, perhaps the last financial year for most of the corporates was closing and seems to be on the economic growth was closing well. But many industries are going to face the economic impact of the COVID this year, and what's looking like the indicators, it's going to greatly impact their profits in the financial in this financial year, and that's going to have an impact on the CSR resources that could be available ahead in the future years. So, how do you see that kind of a situation? And maybe I'm opening up from the other panelists also. Maybe Anjan, from your experience, and uh, Nivedita and Avni, what do you think about this option of a CSR funds, which we're looking at one option in India? So over to you, maybe first Saji, and then I'll ask and then about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think although there are a lot of challenges, and as you rightly said, their chances of reducing their profits, but I still see in India there is a lot of opportunities, and there are big media industries and factories and corporates that are in India, and they have a lot of amount put together, and if the NGOs and the corporates can work together, there will be a lot of resources, especially money. Yeah, that's been.
So, Anjan, what's your experience? I think Kaitas also recently have been doing a lot of CSR as far as the local fundraising in India. So, how do you see these getting impacted now and in future?
So Vikrant, here I would like to say, of course, this is not the new definition that we are trying to look, that the foreign funding is reduced only for this. This has been the story of last 7 to 8 years. If you remember that we started doing that a study on the humanitarian financing, and that gave eye-opening for us in a very literal words that 65% of funding humanitarian financing has been reduced in India. So this is not the case, new cases here, and we were more prepared for that. Most of the agencies were prepared for that. So had been operating in India, trying to raise funds within India. That was the motto, and that was the way the civil society was thinking. And the present COVID has given a push to that we need to raise fund locally. On behalf of Caritas India, based on our strategic pillars, we have got a strong strategic pillars. We call it as sharing communities, and that gives us a way forward to raise a local fund. And of course, I agree with you. There could be the possibilities that what we can happen is that the corporate funding could be less, and the individual funding also could be a problem. But that's not the end. We need to have a better thinking on the fundraising possibilities and all, and do it in a better way for our fundraising strategies and the policies.
Yeah, your voice a bit losing, Anjan. I think so. Maybe Nivedita. I think Wealth Hunger Hilfe is primarily the a license office in India, and how you see that the funds mobilization of your organization going to be impacted in this situation?
Vikrant, so we don't mobilize funds in India for ourselves because we are only a liaison office. We only mobilize funds in Germany or globally. And we envisage that there is going to be a downward move trend of funding, and because the German economy is also going into a recession globally, also the funds to donors, I mean from donors, are going to come down. And I think the situation is not going to get better. India already moved into the middle income category, and the funding has come down from all major donors, and now also from philanthropies, from foundations, from CSRs. We expect that there would be a decline in funds raised. So
Yeah.
it doesn't look too bright, actually.
That's the reality we're living in. And Avni, what's your experience from your organization perspective?
We've had a similar experience. We are also a US based organization, and like Nivedita said, we are a liaison office. So all our funding is raised in the US, and the US is in a worse shape than most of us. And they're also looking at the presidential elections this year. So they are expecting that their studies show that the year that there are presidential elections, uh, the individual giving is even lesser. So we are expecting that that is also going to go down. How do we get out of this situation is another story, and we are looking at partnerships and collaborations. Uh, for the CSR funding, I do feel that they need to be a little more generous, and they need to relax some of the conditions they have. Trust us a little bit more, and they need to go where the need is instead of going where the corporate is. So that kind of change needs to be brought out, and I feel collectively it is our responsibility in some ways to educate them more on how they can give the funds, where they should give them, and how they will be used.
Yeah, I think that's us advocacy with the CSR, and thus need to be there. We see a new development also happen with the COVID reality. I think it's both the programming as well as the thing. We saw this the new entity of a Prime Minister Cares coming in, and it got a very good mobilization, which is the one positive aspect of it, that the people still looking at a lot of giving. It has come up from both the CSR giving as well as the public giving has been part of it. While we still don't know how is it going to be functioning more, there has been also a lot of advocacy, as well as now the recent, the Supreme Court involvement also is there with that, whether these funds could be directed towards the National Disaster Response Force, or within the Niti Aayog discussion and advocacy also has been that perhaps maybe the CSOs can also become the partners in the ways of doing it. We've already seen one very positive thing about the COVID response is the way government has opened up and have warmed up with the partnership with the NGOs across the country, and has been recognized now that the significant amount of response has happened through the NGOs, and this the geo NGO collaboration is really a good option. So, do you think, Anthony, that working there could be options of working through the PM cares? If then, what's those things, and what's your advocacy that how what can we do as a collective for this engagement and to make some of these mechanisms to work? Over to you, Anthony.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Any resource mobilization steps, I think, for good cause is always welcome. So the whole setup of PM Cares from that perspective is really good, and the objective that we see it in the website, also in PM Cares website, is also good. The question is that the government must open up this PM Cares for the civil society organizations. So that because the government in Supreme Court during this COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown, the government of India have accepted that the civil society organization have worked and supported, which is their duty also, and have supported in the same foot with the government in providing kitchen, community kitchen, providing dry ration, even to provide transportation system for the migrant workers. So I think CSO as a whole, as a fraternity, civil society organization, need to come together, need to engage with the government, the PMO office, or the officials, bureaucrats, to make them understand that, see, learn to trust us, learn that we organize the NGO, civil society organization, really are sincere enough to work for the most marginalized and poor people. Our objective and government objectives are similar. We also want to work, and we have reached out beyond where government also cannot reach. So we have our strength, and government should trust that on us. And if they can learn to trust us, which they have also done in many cases, but more trust us and cooperate and coordinate with us and ensure that these funds also gets CSOs get access to it. And also when we get access to it, we are open that PM Care becomes more transparent, more accountable, and also up to the public scrutiny. So it's a good effort, but alone government cannot do, because it's such a huge country with such a multi-disaster and everything, and this type of health hazards, coronavirus will not be the first one or the last one. There will be a lot of such viruses of similar kind will be coming. There will be a lot of health hazards because of climate change or any other aspect. So how do we coordinate with the government is something that CSOs and the government have to come together. We both have to trust each other and work in hand. And that's where the Niti Aayog and the other government organizations can play a major role in bringing both the parties together and think and reflect on it. So I am okay with that. Only I want to say that civil society and also to the government to trust and learn to coordinate and cooperate.
Yes, I think you brought some very pertinent points, Anthony. It's about building more trust, maybe building mechanisms which bring up more transparency, more accountability. We already seeing some good collaborations, collaboration and government opening up with the civil society response has happened. Maybe we need to learn from these experiences and build onto it. Sajeev, from your perspective, what's it that, through which we can build some more trust with the government and work through these mechanisms? Any suggestions for that?
Well, one is we have to lobby at all levels, especially with NDMA and other central government agencies. That is one thing. Second thing, we need to let the government trust us also. Now, for example, in our experience in COVID response, we were able to support the health systems. Like we received requests from the district collector that we need help in dealing with the migrant laborers. We need help in certain hospitals, medical facilities, which we were able to provide. And in return, we were also able to get good support and, from the government itself in our areas where we are working, and also they helped us to do our work also. So I think, well, that is the only option where we all understand each other, trust each other, like some of our previous speakers said. We need, the government needs to trust the NGOs, and the NGOs also needs to open up a little bit of their resources so that government also will be able to trust us. And I think, yeah, that's the way forward. Of course, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Great. Thank you so much, Saji. I think we need to do more on the trust building, and also, as you're saying, is the lobbying and showing our collective work towards that, and that's where the collectives have an importance, Again, but apart from, I think, the working with the government, I think as another thing we have been experiencing is how the CSOs, within the CSOs and the private sector, they've been coming together. We have been, Anjan mentioned about it. I think we have been working on this idea of humanitarian financing in India, looking at an option of creating some kind of the pool funds. I think experiment have been successful in some other countries. While we have had, while we were able to come together as a group of organizations, but many of you here part of that. But then there has been challenges, taking it to the conclusion and fishing it out. So, Anjan, for you, maybe, you see that we have been toying with this idea of pool funds. What do you see the options ahead for us, and what have been the challenges, Anjan, from your experience? Over to you.
Thanks, Vikram. I think, see, there has been a challenge. This is because India is vast, and India, the different people, different organizations has a different mandate of doing the same work in different way. So there would be challenges. If there's no challenges, the good work will not end, come to a good end. With this, having said that, what I would say that the future is the coalition future, because going alone is not going to really serve the purpose and the future what we're going to have ahead of us. So one thing that we need to be we need to come together, not only because one coalitions may not solve the problems of India. The need is such a huge, the geographic is such a huge, so ethical and the need-based coalition is required, be it the pool funding or working for an issue together. So issue-based network and the ethical network is required now, especially COVID has shown us that yes, we individually will not be able to go ahead. The collaborative efforts like Sphere and other networks also is required, and that would give us more strength to do much more advocacy. And coming to the pool funding, yes, of course, there has been an individual's fundraising strategies for each of the organizations, but pool funding not only will give the joint status, joint collaborative efforts, it also will help into the advocacy processes and giving a good shape of the humanitarian sectors. Often at times the challenges comes, it becomes competitive, not complementary. So the time is coming that we need to be complementary to each other, and also start doing a new ways of doing the things.
Yeah, maybe on the new ways of doing the things, could you be a little bit more elaborative, Anjan? What could be that, please?
Yeah, thanks. A new ways, the pool funding is, it's my experience of 18 years. It doesn't exist in India. Pool funding. There's in the concept is there. The greatest examples of the START network in UK. There are other 9 pool funding networks globally exist, but India it's not happening. Probably pool funding, new ways of doing it. Maybe 3 or 4 organizations that we had. India, we have got a good example of the consortium. So few civil society comes together, INGOs comes together, build a consortium for the projects. I would say that ending up with the consortium, not with the projects, but taking it forward for the longer term, maybe giving it a shape of pool funding mechanisms within India, with changing scenarios in humanitarian sectors or the development sector.
Yeah, I think yes, yeah, we have had some experiences with consortium, but those also have been more donor driven. I think yeah, maybe I'll come to that later on. I'll just also like to hear from Nivedita. I think Wealth Hunger Hilfe also has been I think one of the participant in all these discussions, both around the humanitarian financing in India, the options with pool funds, and also the recent dynamics with START. So what's your perspective about it, Nivedita? How you see that the future ahead in India around these mechanisms, new ways of working? Over to you.
Vikrant, on pool funding, I'm not exactly sure what the exact idea is, but I think it has many challenges, because every organization has its own mandate, own geography, thematics. Also, we are a very big country with a very large number of organizations, and I think there needs to be a natural cohesion of ideas when we come together. So it is possible in smaller groups, smaller pools. Also, the pools could be anything. It could be thematic. There could be alliances, and I think there are several alliances. Like already Anjan mentioned, Start a Fund, for example, is one of those. So the idea is good, but it cannot work if we are trying to bring everyone on a platform. So it works only where there is a natural organic cohesion or similarity of mandates within organizations. And in that area, I think it's already happening. So there are various alliances. So already, I mean, Welcome Health is part of Alliance 2015. I mean, it's named 2015, though it's the mandate is much longer. So it's a group of European INGOs, and we work together on whatever we can. But I think we need to go beyond this, you know. So we need to go broader and discuss much more actually.
Yes, I think you made a very pertinent point about is that it's the smaller groups and the like-minded groups where perhaps we have better chances of success, and maybe that's has been a struggle also. So maybe putting it towards the sector pool funds, perhaps organizations working in one sectors, maybe coming together and all could be the direction ahead. Uh, and I think it's coming back onto the the point about Anjan you said about the consortiums and. The one thing is becoming very clear from the discussion and the previous discussion around the new COVID reality is that there need to be more collaboration. There need to be more collaboration with the government. There need to be more collaboration within the organizations. And perhaps we need to look at the among news ways of working is the consortium approach, or even a public-private partnership where both the government and the civil society, and as Anthony was saying, maybe also bringing people and communities together as a people part of it. Again, towards this, what we see that there has been a part success over the years in terms of coordination and networking, but we yet to see many examples of good collaborations. So that's where perhaps I think Anjan, you were talking about these consortiums, but then these consortiums are clearly we see few examples where it was primarily donor driven one. So do we see anything beyond that where organizations not just remain them not limited to coordination, but actually are able to work collaboratively? Do you see some examples like that we have, or do you think we can have something like that going on? Anjan, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll give some few examples. So before that, the key for these consortiums and the value-based work is the value addition to each other. Unless and until, and you rightly said that project-based consortium do not work for future, it will only work for the project to be ended, and within the projects that the understanding is there. But it should be a long-term and value-based association with each other. Just I mean, giving an example with an organization, we have been having a collaboration on the approaches for last 10 years, be it the project and non-project time also. So we keep in touch with that. So that type of associations and the adding value to each other is a great thing. And I would be saying that yes, there would be a donor pressure and donor expectations and the project expectations for the consortium approach, but the consortium approach should not be limited to win the bid or winning a projects or ending a project. It should be adding value to the society, adding value to the communities and within the organization. One of the things that I'd like to stress here is that we need to really find the gaps that's happening into the collaborative processes. And after finding those gaps and try to bridge gaps, and while bridging those gaps, or probably new collaboration might come in, or strengthening the existing ones. So that's the key that we need to enforce ourselves to finding the gaps. If there's something not happening or we want to do something more, what is the gaps, and try to bridge the gaps with reinforcing our energy and strength to that.
Yes, and Saji, from your perspective, do you see some of these gaps which Anjan is talking about in terms of collaborations? Even if a smaller, few organizations show that that it's not just they're coordinating, but they're collaborating from a programmatic point of view. And you see some gaps there, and what are those gaps could be then?
Like Nivedita was sharing, we all have different visions, priorities, whether it be geographical or thematical. Well, but the one good thing that has happened with us is, in the last 5 or 8 years, we have been coordinating well. So that has generated a good understanding between NGOs. And the collaboration has been happening, not 100%, but, we, especially World Vision has been working with Habitat for Humanity and other NGOs and smaller NGOs in the districts where they have their expertise. So collaboration is possible. Yes, of course, gaps are there, but collaboration is possible when we work together in a geographic area with our own expertise for the thematic areas, and we work together to achieve one big goal. So that is possible. And like I was saying, we have been having good coordination, and actually COVID has pushed us further. Actually, that is one of the good outcomes of this COVID pandemic, that NGOs are working, starting to work together, collaborate together. Even government, like we have been discussing, is coming up together. So maybe in future we'll see some public private partnership kind of thing, where we all work together for the same goal with our own expertise in our areas. Besides that, we also see a lot of scope in the new trends that are coming up, or opportunities I should rather say, is working with the FBOs, faith-based organizations, especially with reaching people with awareness to address the stigma related to COVID, and even to actually foster hope among the people, besides of course the communal harmony that we can address as well. So that is also another opportunity for us. We have already started working together. So I think that's another opportunity. Yes.
Yes, I think I do agree. I think there's the new initiatives around the Interfaith Humanitarian Alliance and the examples of these kind of collaborations evolving. But at this stage, I think we also working on the idea, as from the previous discussions, I'm picking it up, is that Nivedita's point about that SDGs are more important and more relevant. Perhaps we need to find new synergies to work around that and make those happens now. So something is being seen as if we can have a multi-year collaborative plan of actions around some sectors, so that within those sectors, few like-minded organizations, smaller groups can come together and nurture collaborations that can move forward. So there has been some thoughts and some discussions happening around that in the various sector groups also. So that's do set a trend and set a direction for the future collaborations. In the light of all this discussion, if I again go back to, I think is Avni, what do you see hearing all this, and from your experience and all, what's the course correction we can have as a system ahead for working for the future goals? Over to you, Avni.
Thank you, Vikrant. The tough task of putting all this together you've given me, but I can see you smiling. But one point in working together, we found co-creation being a very good tool, where you come together and you co-create a program. So from the very beginning, there is understanding. And it always doesn't need to be like-minded organizations. Sometimes organizations which are covering various things, so that you bring each organization's strength to that area would also be helpful. So sometimes these co-creation programs really work well. Looking at how it has happened for so long and how we need to probably reshape ourselves and work in the future, like a course correction, as Vikrant has put it. I wouldn't call it course correction, but I would say looking at the future. What I see is that listening to everybody, that there needs to be more faith, more trust, and more transparency amongst ourselves about how much money there is, where we want to work, how we want to work, what our missions are, and how we can bring ourselves together. I would again emphasize co-creation, but I would say create with the community. Now, after so many years of working in the rural areas, we know that there are community-based organizations, and as Anthony, I think, said, they took good responsibility in Kashmir for being the first responders. So I think our community is also now more aware, more educated, more connected with all the mobiles and internet and things like that. So we should involve the community as part of it. And working with Haifa, we've had experience of giving setting up management structures within the community and giving them responsibility of financials as well as operational. So, organizing trainings, organizing food during the trainings, organizing relief. So they've been, community can take on that responsibility, and that kind of would make our implementation a little more transparent and possible. So I think that is also very key to seeing how we go ahead in the future. Back to you, Vikram.
Well, thank you so much, Avni. I think it bring it together as a co-creation, and I do hear you also saying it's not necessarily like-minded, but then we look at all kind of organizations, maybe smaller groups, bigger groups, but this is the one of the way forward. And on the way forward, maybe if we are also running out time to look at some of the questions from chat box and some hands also showing up. So one quick, one top recommendation from each one of you, maybe in just one sentence, one point. Nivedita, will you like to go first? Okay. It's. I'm not sure Nivedita is still around, or maybe Saji, you would like to say?
Yep. Okay. I think one of the top priorities would be collaboration between NGOs and also with the government. And the opportunities are where the reverse migration is happening. So skilling, mapping the skills of the people who have come back, and using it to add value and provide opportunities. I think that is one area where we should work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Saji. Anthony, would you like to say next?
Yeah. I feel the way forward for me is that there should be a multi-stakeholder collaborations taking place, in which the community should be a very, very important part. So the government, CSR, CSOs, as well as the community, as well as the whole consortium idea of coming together. That's one of the things that is a way forward. The other thing I feel that in all our developmental projects now, we need to seriously think disaster risk reduction component to be mainstream. So disaster cannot be only natural disasters, but also all the type of disasters that we are seeing. So how we mainstream those things in all our programs and look into that. And also in this COVID-19, there are a lot of organizations, like I am aware some of the organizations which are forerunner in disability right are facing a huge fund crunch, and they are an organizations which need to be there for the people, for the disabled people right, and for the development. So such organizations, we all organizations may be able to support, we all should bring those organizations which are really required for the community, for the marginalized community together, and work together in collaboration. We may have a purposeful relationship, but we should all come together for a better cause. A single fighting or solo walking is not at all the present situation that demands from us.
Thanks so much, Anthony, and maybe I think Anjan, will you like to say a word?
Yeah, just I'd like to, as I was saying, that the era is now collaborative era. Now, I take the word from Anthony also, just reciprocate the same. But we need to build up a common visions of the civil society now, and work together to resolve some of the issues. So common mandate, common visions need to be developed now onwards.
Yeah, great. I think this common vision very strong. I wonder if Nivedita is
Yes,
there.
yes,
Yeah.
Vikrant. I was actually muted, but I'm back now. So, well, I won't repeat, but I would say collaborate, like everybody says, collaborate, work, all stakeholders work together, government, CSR, communities, CSOs, And also, I would say work together with government, but don't get co-opted. So that would be my point.
Yes, great. I think staying independent, but staying in a collaborative. Great. Again, over to you. You are mute. Okay, so I think still probably we'll see that we get Avni later on. It has been a
Yeah,
very
yeah, I'm on. Okay.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I missed you for a second. Okay. So one word would be for me the community and co-creation.
Community and co-creation. Yeah, thank you so much for these two words. I think it's one big takeaway for me also from here. It's been a very interesting discussion. I think we took a lot of questions. We opened up a lot of questions ahead. But really some good insights of working ahead. I see some hands up and few questions on the chat box to me. We can try to take some questions from the participants before we move to the closure. So it's Mr. Javed Tuck. I see his hands is raised. I'm doing an unmute to you, Mr. Javed. Yeah, please ask your question, Javed. Please be brief. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, I am Javed from Jammu and Kashmir, and I just want to tell that almost all the public donation got dried up during this COVID lockdown, and most of the donors are not in a position to help the NGOs. And I see that trusts that were working on the grassroots level, maybe their work will be hampered now. What do you suggest that alternative could be to carry on the activities?
Yes, so it's a question about that again, the same thing, resources drying up and how the grassroots level organizations can be helped with this. So the questions right to the center of a localization debates and discussion going on among the panelists. Maybe somebody will like to take on this question.
I would like to respond a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you, Javedji, for taking out, for bringing this question. And this is one of the big challenge, and also definitely organization, national organization may not have that difficulty or very quick impact on the resource crunch, but grassroots level organizations who are basically working at the community definitely will face very quickly that problem that I see, though it's look very pessimistic, but that's the reality. And that's why, Mr. Javed, I feel that we need to redefine the whole definition of resource. And that's what we need to see, that how community funds the projects, how community helps each other, and how are the new ways of mobilizing resources, because coming time will be real difficult. So the resource definition should not be only money, but it can be knowledge, it can be the other form of resources, and we need to think out of the box.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And maybe Anjan, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I agree with Anthony. And the other way is that the time has come to educate the donor about these unforeseen situations. And I would say that there has been instances that the local NGOs have not been able to cope up with the situations, and the funding has been restricted or not given for the particular time. So the staff also did not get salaries, and also probably a collaborative approach needs to be discussed, and how the NGO, the donor educations to be taken forwards in this type of crisis periods.
Yes, and for Mr. Javed, I think if I may also like to chip in that recently, I think the whole initiative of grand bargain and localization, there has been also strong commitments by the national, international organizations to direct more resources directly toward local organizations. So I would, and for that, lots of awareness is happening, capacity building is happening. I will encourage you to get involved with such efforts, and also to Sphere India. Also, I think we when we have our such panels, such discussions, please stay involved. And those are one ways of looking at the resources. Second thing also is I see is that again, as the more grassroots level NGOs and local organizations, they themselves also have to see that how the capacities for resource mobilization at their level, maybe through collaborations within this the local organization with the communities and other similar organizations and other bigger organizations can happen, and you people can yield better resources. But stay tuned on the developments around localization and grand bargain. I think that's one clearly important for the organizations at the grassroots to get involved. And more power to you, and more sources towards the grassroots actions and everything. We'll move towards the next question. I see a hand from Nambi Chilaya. Maybe I'm unmuting you. Please ask your question, Mr. Nambi. Accept the unmute request and sorry.
Vikrant, let me just make Mr. Nambi.
Yes,
you can unmute yourself now, Nambi. I have.
Yeah, now.
Yes,
now,
we can hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Right, okay. It's a good discussion, but 2-3 points I want to highlight here. One of the important thing is that the migrant workers suffered a lot. When they were suffering, the government as well as the CSOs were not even having the data on them. And again, one of the major reason was that when the migrants are migrating to various places, in India we have got something called Interstate Migrant Workers Act. I think it is only in papers. I think nothing has happened on that. I think in the context of NGO programming, we have to look at in the context of making use of this particular act and try to assure the rights of migrants. That is one thing. Secondly, we have also seen a lot of unorganized workers suffering, because even when the government announced various schemes, even when the government was ready to give some money for the workers who are registered under the welfare board, many of them were not able to avail it because they have not registered themselves, especially the workers. I think somewhere as an NGO, CSO, as part of our NGO programming, we have to also look at this part of it, and we have to strategize ourselves in enabling all the unorganized workers to become part of the welfare board. I think that can be part of the programming of NGOs. Thirdly, I think it's also mentioned that there is likelihood of increased child labor because of increased poverty. I think we have to, and as part of programming, NGO CSO programming, we have to very, very closely monitor this aspect. Definitely, there's going to be increased child labor. So in that context, we have to collaborate. Oh, 1 minute, only I'm finishing. The only thing is, we have to also collaborate as part of the programming of NGOs I'm sharing. I think we have to also very closely work with the labor department as well as the education department, so that the increase of child labor is curtailed. I think I don't have a question. I thought these are some of the areas which were not mentioned as part of the discussion. I thought of sharing this part. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We're having other discussions which are more focusing on these issues.
Okay.
But thanks for bringing up your point. So maybe the next question from Parul Sheth. Valerie, can you help with that? Unmuting Parul.
Sure, Vikrant, I'm doing that. 1 second. Parul, could you ask a question now?
Yes, my question is that, we are working with children on education. Now, it is very difficult to bring children together at this point. Now, it is so very difficult to also continue our activities. So, what are, and the children with whom we are working, hello, I hope you're hearing me.
Yeah, we are hearing. Please come to your question.
Yeah, so it is very difficult to connect with children because very few children have phones and particularly with internet. So in this situation, what are the different alternatives that different organizations have tried to connect with children and the communities?
Yeah, thank you. I think a very good question. Maybe somebody would like to answer from the panelists.
Hi, this is Saji. Yes, rightly you have said, especially in rural areas, reaching the children with digital technology and all was is challenging. But what we have done is we have trained volunteers. We have through volunteers we trained the parents, and we've tried to use different digital media like Google Meet, Zoom, and we have used what do you call the WhatsApp messages, recorded messages, audio messages to reach the children. But yes, like we see in the urban areas, it is not possible in all rural areas, especially with the poor who do not have, free unlimited access. Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Great. We can take one last question, maybe from Mr. Ramesh Sudhan. Valerie, can you help him unmute?
Yes, I'm doing that. Just one second. Mr. Ramesh, could you accept my request, please? I've made you the co-host. Also, you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Ramiz Sudhan from border town of Uri from Kashmir. Uh, we have a particular situation on the border of shelling, and the children there are in great need of some intervention, psychosocial or emotional. But the problem with me is I have although started my initiative in my own capacity with my friends, but I want to register my organization and actually start working with some formal setup. And how my question is that what is the chance of having a startup and then to get all the activities under one umbrella and start, especially considering the situation around, and also Mr. Tak was also asking the same question that funds are being dried up. We're not getting enough funds. So what are the chances of a new startup in this situation? Thank you.
Thanks, Ramesh. Anybody among the panelists want to take on this question?
Yes, maybe I could.
Yes.
So I would like to mention that grants is not the only way to get support. And I think a good way also would be to look for impact investments, especially if you are looking on livelihood related activities. So there are impact investors, there are angel investors, there are people who can give loans or some kind, there are venture supporters. So if you are looking particularly at livelihood kind of activities, you might look at that option.
Yeah. And Ramesh, I will like you to stay touch base with Sphere India team also. I think within Sphere India, we're conceptualizing, working on our commitments for localization and towards the grassroots organizations. We are conceptualizing maybe incubating sport for such interest where we can help you formalize your entities in terms of registration and other help which may be required. And as Nivita said, the grants is not the only way. And what could be the other ways and other options for you to look at resources within the communities? Beyond that, I think is we may organize a special session for that, especially aiming at the grassroots organization and with initiatives like yours. So stay tuned about that. Okay, I think this has been one great discussion, and I think it's not the only one. We expanding it for another round of discussion on Monday, also on the same theme, with some more CSO leaders. It's interesting to look at, how the COVID has impacted the NGOs programming and has given a new direction and new strategies for their future programming, how it's impacting the global and the national goals, national schemes, and what are the innovations we can have around this, and the larger challenges around resources available and what approaches can work. Some very interesting perspective has come up, and as a collective, also for Sphere India, we benefited from all these discussions, and we will put it together, feed it to the future discussions and the strategies which were evolving around this, to look at the evolution of NGO programming as well as the resource mobilization and a larger collaboration which can be nurtured in these times. And with this, my opportunity to thank all our eminent panelists, Mr. Anthony Chetri, Mr. Anjan Bagh, Ms. Abni Malhotra, Ms. Nivadita Vashne, and Mr. Sajeev Varghese. We could miss the hearing it from Vidisha and Anshul due to some last minute changes in their plans, but I think we will get an opportunity ahead. My opportunity to thank all of you, all the participants who has been there around very patiently listening, and for more importantly, for all the important good work you are doing at the front end of this COVID war. More power to all of you. My thanks to Valerie, and I give it back to her for the final closure and the announcement. Over to you, Valerie.
Thank you, Vikrant. That was an amazing session, and thank you for officially thanking everybody. I would still like to extend my thanks to all the panelists and the moderator, Mr. Vikrant. I'm going to hold you back only for another minute as I make some final announcements about our next session. So to download the certificate of participation for this particular session, please visit our website, www.sphereindia.covid19academy.org after 24 hours. You will see a button called certificate next to the name of the panel discussion, and you will be able to download your certificate there. I'm also very happy to announce that we will be having another round of discussion on the same topic in a few different questions, but a brand new panel, and we would love for you to join that discussion as well. So this discussion is planned at the same time, that is 4 to 5:30 on Monday, 22nd June. So NGO programming in the context of COVID-19, the part 2 of the series. If you have any more questions, you can email us at covid19academy@sphereindia.org.in. We love to hear from you. Your questions, your suggestions, your feedback, everything is welcome. And with that, I would like to wish all of you a very good and safe evening and a great weekend, guys. Have fun. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
It was a good
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vikrant. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.